and welcome to the sixth class of the JavaScript Simplified course. In our last class, which happens to be the fifth class, we treated some topics um, such as return statement, introduction to array basic operations, introduction to objects, dot and bracket notation, and object notation. So these were the things we looked at in our last class. But it's like there's a mix up here. This is supposed to be for class. This is supposed to be for class 5, not class 6. So it was a mix up here. Then cut. Let's go class 6. I'm going to remove this. All right, good. So in today's class, we're going to look at loop statement. So under loop statement, we'll look at for loop, while loop, do while loop, for off loop, and for in loop. All right. So let's move on. Um. All right. Let's go to the notes here. What is loop? In JavaScript, a loop is a programming construct that allows you to repeatedly execute a block of code as long as a specified condition is true. Let me repeat that. A loop is a programming construct that allows you to repeatedly execute a block of code as long as a specified condition is true. Another way around, loops in JavaScript allows you to execute a block of code multiple times. So that's what it means. It allows you to execute a block of code multiple times based on the condition, or as long as a specified condition is true, it will keep executing the code multiple times. All right. And there are several types of loop in JavaScript. There are several types of loop in JavaScript. We have the for loop, we have the um, do loop, we have the do while loop, we have the for off loop, and we have the for in loop. Yeah. Okay. While loop, do while loop, for off loop, and for in loop. And we're going to be looking at each of these loops today. So let's start with for loop. Just understand that loop is actually used to execute a block of code multiple times as long as a specified condition is what? True. So let's look at for loop under the main types of loop that we have. So for loop, this loop iterates over a block of code a specified number. So it loops over a block of code a specified number of time. Hold on, let me accept someone. All right. You're all welcome. The general and Nihiso, yeah. All right. So back to loop. This loop iterates over a block of code a specified number of time. I'm talking about for loop now. A for loop is commonly used when the number of iteration is known. So a for loop consists of three parts. Let's go straight in. A for loop consists of three parts. So I'll come here, for loop. or let's just say loop statement. And under it we have one for loop. So a for loop consists of three parts. The first part is the initialization. The second part is the condition, and the third part is called increment or decrement. So these are the three parts that consist of what? For loop. Or for loop consists of three parts. So the first part is initialization, the second part is condition. I don't think I wrote that well. Okay, yes, condition, and the third part is increment or decrement. All right, increment or decrement. So that is the part that makes up of what? For loop. So you can see it here: initialization, condition, increment or decrement. So let's go back to our code. So for the initialization, it defines a variable, while the condition means that the loop will keep running while the condition is what? True. And the loop will keep, the increment or decrement will update the variable. So let's take for instance, we want to initialize a variable. We initialize a variable with let I equals what? Is 0, or let's just say equals 1, and we want to get a value, or this is our output here. We want an output of 1 to 5. So 1 to 5. So this is our output, 1 to 5. So that means if we want an output of 1 to 5, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we need an initialization. So we need to define a variable that will hold the first number. We define a variable that will hold the first number. So the first number is what? 1. So say let I be equals to what? 1. Then the second one now will be the condition. So the condition will be you want I to be less than what? Less than, or it can either be less than or equals to 5, or it can be less than or equals to 5, or it can be, let me just do or, let's do this or, it can be I less than 6, whichever one. You get that now? So this is what we are trying to do here. We want to get an output of 1 to 5, an output of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we need a starter count and initialization. We need to initialize a value. So we initialize or define a variable by giving it an initial value of 1. So now we want the condition to be, as long as this condition is true, we want to keep getting what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You get that now? So the loop will keep running as long as this condition is true. So we want, so for us to be able to get 1 to 5, that means our condition will have to be I must be less than or equals to 5, or I must be less than 6. So I less than 6 will have to be from 5 downwards. Then this will now be increment, not decrement. It's going to be I plus plus like this. This will be increment. All right, this will be increment. So this is how it works here. So our initial value is 1. The condition says that we want the loop to keep running as long as I is less than or equals to 5, or as long as I is less than 6. But what increases the value from 1 or from the initial value to other values is what? This increment, I plus plus. So let's see how it works here. So I'll say for loop. So to initialize a value or to define a variable, we just do let I equals what? 1. So this I is just convention. It doesn't have to be I. It can be count. It can be anything. It can be any variable name. Do you get that now? But I is just conventional. It's just convention. You get that? So it's just convention. Doesn't mean that if you use any other variable name, it won't work. Of course, it will work. All right. So we say let I. So we assign 1 to what? I. Then we end the statement. Then the next one will be the condition. We'll say I. So you can either use, we want I to be less than or equals to 5, or you want I to be what, less than what, 6. Then end that one to end the condition. Then you now do I plus plus. Of course, I taught you all of this. So this to increase the value by 1, to increase the initial value of I by 1. So now I will console the log I. All right, I'll console the log I. So now let me explain this again. This is a for loop statement, and this for loop statement receives three consists of three parts, and the first part represents the initialization, where we define the value. Then the second part is condition, where we also define the condition, and the third part is increment or what, decrement. So we have let I equals 1. They will have let I be less than what, 6. So this is what it means here. When the loop starts, are you with me? When the loop starts, it's going to start with an initial value of what, 1. Before it output 1, it's going to check, is 1 less than 6? So 1 is less than 6. It's going to give us what, 1. So let me do it up here. It's going to give us 1. So that will be the first value. Then this increment, it will increase. So the value will be increased by what, 2, based on this increment value that we have here. So it's going to be increased by 2. So before it output 2, it's going to check, is 2 less than 6? Because it has to filter it has to filter it through the condition. You get, it has to pass it through the condition, and if it meets the condition, then it's going to be outputted, or we are going to output it. So we have 2 here. So increase the value by 2. So you check, is 2 less than 6? Of course, 2 is less than 6. It will output it. That's the as long as the condition is true, we will get the number. So it increase the value by 3. Is 3 less than 6? Of course, it gives us 3. It increase the value by 4. 4 is less than 6. 5 is also less than 6. But when it increases value to 6, now it checks, is 6 less than 6? No. 6 is not less than 6. So that makes the condition false. So so that makes the condition false, and it will eventually terminate what, the for loop. So it is the condition that will determine if the for loop will keep running or if the for loop will stop running. So if the condition is true, the loop will keep running, but if the condition is false, the loop will stop running immediately. All right, so if you save this now and we'll check our console. So inspect. Now look at, we have 1 2 3 4 5. All right, you see, very very simple, very very simple. That's for loop. You get that now, and we can also, instead of doing 1 2 3 4 5, we can also make it descending. You know, this is an ascending order. We can also make it descending order, whereby it will start from the highest to the lowest. So we can do that too as well. So I can just come here. Let me do like a console, the log, and do descending order loop. All right, so I'm just going to copy this, I'll paste it here. So here it's going to start with 5. So 5 4 3 2 1. All right, so here, since we are starting with 5, that means the initial value of I will no longer be 1, it will be what, 5. Then the condition will have to be, so who can help me, what will be the condition? Let me ask you. You know, the first one with the condition is I has to be less than 6. So what will be the condition here? What will be the condition here? And what will be the, will this be increment or decrement? Will this be increment or decrement? So please, someone should unmute your mic and answer my question. I hope you are still there. All right, good. So we are trying to get a descending order from 5 to 1. So what will be the condition? Who can help me? Ah, okay. It's like all right, the general. what will be
It will be decrement.
what's the answer?
It will be decrement.
Okay, this will be decrement. Fantastic. Minus minus. But what will be the condition? The condition, how are you going to, you know, the condition, how is it going to be like? Is it going to be I less than 6 or what?
Yeah, it should be I less than 6.
No, it won't be I less than 6. Now, let me explain. If it is I less than 6, now watch. If it is I less than 6, this is going to give us an infinite loop in the sense that if we are starting with 5, all right? If we are starting with 5, before it output 5, it's going to check, is 5 less than 6? Yes, 5 is
Yeah,
less than 6.
it
That's
will
good.
up
So it will
to
give us
5.
5. So it will keep decreasing.
Mm.
So because of this minus, it will keep decreasing, decreasing, decreasing. Even though we get to 1, 1 is less than 6. It will get to 0, minus 1, minus 2. So that will result to what we call infinite loop. You get that now? So the condition has to be correct such that we will stop at 1. So what will be the correct condition? Who can tell me the correct condition? All right.
It should be I less than 6
Mr.
equal to
Felix.
1.
Okay, hold on. Let Mr. Felix answer the question.
Yeah, it will be I greater or equal to 1.
I greater or equals to what? 1. Fantastic.
Equal to 1.
Yes. It will be I greater or equals to 1. Very good. Now, this is it. Once we start with the initial value of 5, it reduces. Okay, we start with initial value of 5. It checks the condition. Is 5 less than or equal? Is 5 greater than or equals to 1? Yes. It reduces to 4. The condition is still true. It reduces to 3, the condition is still true. It reduces to 2, the condition is still true. It reduces to 1, the condition is still true. Because 1 is not greater than 1, but at least it's equals to what? 1. So it's still true. So when it reduces value to 0, it's going to check, is 0 greater or equals to 1? No. So that makes it what? False. So eventually, as a result, it's going to stop the loop from what? Running. And that's what we have here. Can you see descending order? Descending order. Can you see 5, 4, 3, 2, 1? Descending order loop. You see that? Fantastic. All right. So that's for the for loop. So let me comment the console here. So let's try that with while loop. So let's do while loop. While loop. I'm just teaching all of this because the one you are going to be using more often than not of all this traditional loop is the for loop. So the while loop execute as long as the specified condition is true. So this is how while loop works. So we initialize the starter count inside of the for loop parenthesis, but for the while loop you do it outside. You say let I equals what? 1. Then you now say while. So in this while, that's where you specify the condition. I love this. So while is saying that as long as I, okay, while I is less than 6, you want to get, so you console the log. So watch, you console the log I. Just, I'm going somewhere. If you console the log I and you save, you come here. We're only getting. Why am I still having this here? Okay, it's still loading here. Load fast, load fast. Let me open it in this browser. All right, good. Still loading. What's the problem? Hold on. Okay, the problem has been resolved. So I just had to complete this statement. I had to complete the while loop. I wanted to show you this without the I plus plus. So probably that was the reason why it was hanging. So I'll just do this with my condition. So the while loop means the while loop will keep executing, or it will execute as long as the specified condition is true. So we initialize the I outside, then we say why I is less than 6. This is the condition. We want to console the log I, then after that we increase it. So this I talk. So you can do the same thing too for descending order too as well. Let me comment this. So alright, so it works both ways. You see that one, two, three, four, five. And let's move on. Let's look at do while loop. Let's look at do while loop. We'll still come back to for loop anyways, but just let's just look at do while loop. So this will be two. Um, all right. So the next one will be three do while loop. So the do while loop runs the code at least once before checking the condition. So it runs the code once before checking the condition. So let's say let I be equals to I. Okay, I think we already have let I be equals to 1 here. So I'll just do, so I'll maintain this. I'll still maintain let I equals to 1. So what I'm just going to do, I'll just do a curly bracket. Then I'll console the log I. See that I'll console the log I, and I'll do I plus plus. So the condition will have to be after this parenthesis. I'll say while I is less than what? 6. So this is what it means here. We have an initializer here. We assign one to I. So here we say do this while I is less than 6. So it's pure English. So this means that the do while loop will at least execute the code, or we run the code at least once before checking for the condition. So it will run this code once before checking for what? The condition. So let's say for example I don't have the condition here, I cut the condition. Let's see. Okay, it's even giving me error here, so let me take it back. So this is what it means here. It's going to execute it's going to execute the code once before it checks what the condition. So this is it here. We have an initializer. So say do inside of the block of do, we define what we want we want the do loop to execute. Then we say want you to execute this while I is less than what 6. And if you check, we are see that we are getting 6. Why are we getting 6? Consider log I plus plus. I'm supposed to get come on, still getting 6. Something is wrong with my code. All right, you know what? Let me comment this part. Let me comment this part. All right, good. It worked. So let me bring it back to 6. So here now can you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Good. That's good. So before we look at the next one, which is for off loop and for in loop, let's still do some nice stuff with for loop. Let's do some nice stuff with for loop. All right. So now let me comment this console, or just comment everything generally. Yeah, and also the let I. I'm going to comment it too as well. So let's do some exercises. Um, for loop or more examples on for loop. So let's say we want to get the even number from 1 to 10. We want to get even number from 1 to 10. So that is like 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10. Of course, I'm sure we know what is even number and we know what is odd numbers. So if we want to get odd numbers too as well, from 1 to 10, so that is 1, 3, 5, and 7. What about 9? Yeah, 9. All right, good. So we want to get odd numbers and what? Even numbers. So how do we do it? How do we do it? It's very simple. So I come here, I do my for loop. I'll say let I be equals to what? 1. Then I want I to be less than what? 11. And I want I to be plus plus. Alright, good. I hope I'm not missing anything. Okay, yeah, this part. The I. Alright, then we want to get an even number. So to get even numbers are numbers that are divisible by 2. So that means when you divide the number by 2, the remainder will be 0. So this is what we are going to do here, because if you console the log I here, we are going to get a number from 1 to 10. So how can we conditionally get the even numbers? It's very simple. To conditionally get the even numbers, all we just have to do is to use what we call we should use the if statement. So I'll say if. So the if will now be if I modulus 2 is equals to what? Is 0. So you see all the things that we've learned, or all the things that we learned in our previous class 1, class 2, class 3. That's what we are using here now. You see that? So this modulus, I explained that in class 1, or I think class 1 or class 2. Then this equality, this equals to, strict equals to, I think I also explained that in class 2 as well. So you see that, because now we know that the value of I is from 1 to what? 10. So we want to only get any value that when you divide it by 2, the remainder will be equals to what? Is 0. That's the essence of what? The modulus there. So I modulus 2. If I modulus 2, the remainder is equals to 0, then get me that what? That value of I. You get that now? So if now the value of I is from 1 to 10, so it's going to be 1 modulus 2. Is 1 modulus 2 equals to 0? No. So it's going to filter it out. So any varying number of I that satisfies this condition is what we are going to what? Output. So and like I told you earlier, I think when I started teaching you the conditional statement, that's the if and all that. So I told you that you can have a if and not have a else, but you cannot have a else without a if, because else is an alternative of if. In the event that the condition specified is not true, then we can provide what? An else. But you cannot have an else without a if, but you can have if without else. So in this case now, we only need if, we don't need else. So any of the value of I that matches this condition, that is what we want to get. So I can do it like this: console.log I can consider log I and look at, it's giving me 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. So you can do it like this: consider log I inside of the if block. But since it's just one line of code that we are, what do you call it? One line of code that we want to output here, I can just do it like this and I save. and it will still give me the same results. All right, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. So I can do the same thing too for odd numbers. I can do the same thing too for odd numbers. Let me just copy this part here and do for odd numbers. Odd numbers. I wrote other number. Odd numbers. So for odd numbers, it's very simple. Let me just copy and paste this. Paste it here. So I'm just going to change the value from. So it's still the same thing. It's just the condition I need to change. It's going to be um this the opposite. This one is strict equals to. So we are going to use not strict equals to. Yeah. So we are only looking for the value that when you divide the value of I by 2, the remainder is not equals to 0. That's the one we are looking at. So and if you check, we are getting 1, 3, 5, 7, and what? 9. We see that? Very correct. I hope you understand this up to this point. Do you understand it, guys?
Yes, sir. It is
Okay.
clear.
It's clear. All right. Good, good, good. Good. Okay. Niyosi has left. So she'll watch the video later. All right. So let's not waste too much time here because we still need to look at how we can use for loop um for loop using for loop on strings and arrays and all that. All right, so before we look at that, let's still look at more example on break and continue. Let's look at break and continue. Break and continue statement. So let me write that here. Break and continue statement. So I will comment this console. So now what is break and what is continue? So for break statement, break statement. So a break statement terminates the execution of the loop and passes the control to the next statement for okay after blah 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 blah. Blah. Okay, it's not complete yet. Okay, let me just use the one I have here. So yeah, break statement terminates the loop immediately when executed. Break statement terminates the loop immediately when executed. So I repeat, break statement terminates the loop immediately when executed. All right, so let's look at examples on break. Let's say we have this if no okay for loop let I equals why am I always forgetting to add I? Then we'll say I okay let's do this and here I want to break out of the loop now. So I'll say um if I is equals to 5. All right. So what I want to do is I'll do break. Then after the if I'll do console log I. Now watch. Let's see the result we are going to get. Let me put the console side by side with come here. So now watch. We have 1, 2, 3, 4. So now the thing is break statement terminates the loop immediately when executed. So now the loop, the break statement will stop this loop from running when I is equals to what, 5. So the moment it gets to 5, it's going to stop the loop. It's going to what, stop the loop. It's going to stop it. But though it's not going to execute 5, it's just going to execute number before 5, all the numbers before 5. But once it gets to 5, it will break it. It will just break immediately. It will stop that. It will terminate the function, the for loop, the for statement. You get that now? The for loop statement is going to terminate it. That's how break work. So now let's look at continue. Let's look at continue statement. So the continue statement, let me comment this. So I'm going to say for loop let I equals what, 1, and let I, yeah. So here I will say, okay, if I is equals to 5, I want to continue. Then from here I'll console.log this. Let me comment this. So what is the meaning of continue? Continue simply means that you want to, the continue statement skips the current iteration and moves to the next one. So it skips the current iteration. So what, so when we use for loop to generate 1 to 11, the moment we get to 5 of the value of I, is going to skip 5 and continue the iteration. So it will skip the current iteration and move to the next one. So that's what it means here. So now if you check the result here, we are getting 1, 2, 3, 4. It skips 5, then moves to 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You see that now? That's continue. So continue is different from break. Break means that it terminates. Continue means skip. Break terminates. Continue skips. So we can say, okay, we want to skip 5 to 8, or let's say we want to skip 4 to 7. If you want to skip 4 to 7, you want to skip 4 to 7, this is what you're going to say I greater or equals to what, 4. You get that? You can do I greater than 3, but let's start with I greater or equals to 4, then and not or I less than equals to 7, or you can just do I less than 8. So let's just do 7. So if you save now, it's going to omit 4, 5, 6, 7. It's going to skip that value. And can you see 1, 2, 3? There's no 4, no 5, no 6, no 7. So we have 1, 2, 3, then 8, 9, 10. You see that now? You see that now? That's how the continue work. It skips. So it doesn't terminate, it skips. All right, fantastic. So now let's see how we can use for loop on array. Let's see how we can use for loop on arrays. For loop on arrays. All right, so for loop on array, or let's call it using for loop on arrays. So let's see how it works. So array is one of the objects that can be looped over. So there are several of them in JavaScript that can be looped over. Number one, we have arrays. Arrays can be looped over. Strings can be looped over. We have maps also can be looped over, which we are going to look at in this class. We have set, it can also be looped over, but literal object cannot be looped over because it's not an iterable. But there's a way that it has its own loop which is for in loop that we can use to loop over an object. But iterables are arrays, strings, maps, sets. These are what iterables, meaning that they can be what looped over. They can be looped over. They can be looped over. All right. So let's say we have this number here. Let um numbers be equals to this. We'll put that in an array. Let's do two more. Okay, yeah. Put this in an array. So now we want to loop over this array using for loop. Initially, all the while we've been using for loop, we didn't use it on anything. All right. So now we want to use it on array. Then afterwards, we're going to use it on strings. So for the map and set, that will be a later topic that we're going to treat. So we have this array, and if you still remember, I told you that array, the index of an array is what, zero base. So that means the index of 10 is 0, 20 is 1, 30 is 2, 40 is 3, and 50 is what, 4. So we have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. So now how do we loop over the array based on the knowledge of index that we have? So to loop over an array using the for loop, we say for. Now here we say I. Let I be equals to what? Now let me test your knowledge now. We want to use the for loop to loop over an array. I want to start with the first value. So to start with the first value, so what will be the initial value of I? Who can answer that question? What will be the initial value of I? Do you have an idea? Okay, we only have one person left. All right. So the general, I'm sure you're still with me, right?
Yes, yes, sir.
Okay, so now
I'm
this
with
is
you.
so do you have an idea of the initial value of I? Or should I just continue?
Yeah, let's uh,
Okay, do you have an idea, right? Now this is it here.
no.
But I'm sure you still remember that the index of an array
Start
is
from
zero
start
base.
from zero. Start
It starts from
yeah,
zero.
it's zero bit.
So that means
Start
that,
from zero.
all right, good. That means that if you want to use the for loop to loop over an array and you want to start from the first value to the last value, that means you have to get the index value, the index of the first value, which is what is zero. So you say let I
Zero.
equals to what is zero. Now
Okay.
you get that now. So what would be the okay, before the condition, let me do the increment I plus plus. So what would be the condition? The condition will be what? You want the for loop to keep looping over the array until until the condition is false. So what will be the condition? What will be the condition? No idea. All right. So this is the condition here. Since we are starting with an initial value of 0, which is what, this, I want to use the loop to loop over the entire value of the array. If the initial value is 0, then the last value, what's the index of the last value? The general, what's the index of the last value?
Four.
4. So now it means that we are going to do something. We are saying let I be less than what? We want I to be less than or equals to 4, or just say I
Or
less
equal to
than
two.
or 5. So we can say let I be less than 5, or let I be less than or equals to 4. Now this is it here. So yes, if I console the log, just hold on. If I console the log, I let's see what we are going to get. Let's see if we are getting is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Apparently, is that true? Yes, it's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Correct. So it's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So with the for loop now, we've been able to get the indexes of each of the value, the indexes of the array values, or the index of each of the value of the array. So this is 0 here represent 10, 1 represent 20, 2 represent 30, 3 represent 40, and 4 represent what? 50. But what if this is static? This is not dynamic enough, the condition, because what if later on and now I added another value of, let's say, 60. Let's say I added two extra value. So adding two extra value, that means the condition does not cater for that value. Let me show you that the condition will not cater for what? That value. So now the length or the index of the array is now 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But what we did here was to get a value of 0 to what? 4. But what about the 60 and 70? How are we going to cater for it? So this will lead me to an idea, or this will lead me to what we already know that we are going to implement here, which is using the length of the array. Because when you use the length of the array, it will, even though you pass in additional value or extra value to it, it will still be captured in the length of the array. So instead of just doing 5 here, which is static, we'll just say numbers dot what? Length. So if you do numbers dot length and you save, it will capture that. Now it is no longer a 0 to 4. Now it's now what? Is 0 to what? 6. You see that now? Is 0 to 6. So using numbers dot length is more, is it is a best practice, and it's more dynamic, so that in the event you add more values to the array, the number dot length will capture that. You get that now? Because the number dot length, or the dot length, simply means the total number of values that are in an array. All right, so let's move on. Um, so if you console the log I, we have is 0 to 6, but we are not just really interested in the we are not interested in the index, like is 0 to 6. We are not interested in it like per se. We want to use the index. This no is 0 to 6 that is being generated by for loop. We want to use it to get each of the values of the array. Each of what? The value of the array. So how can we do that? Please pay attention. So with the for loop, we're able to get is 0 to 6. So we want to use the value, the varying value of I, to get the actual value of this array. So the varying value of I will represent the index or the indexes of the array value. So now, instead of doing console.log I, is going to be console.log numbers at position what? I. Because this is how we can retrieve or access the value of an array. So if you save this now, you are going to get 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, and what? 70. You see that? Very simple. Very, very simple. I hope you understand this. Do you understand it, or should I recap or explain? Should I recap? Are you there? All right, let's move on. I believe you understand this. So I think we can proceed. All right. So this is how we can use for loop to loop over what? An array. But let's say we want to do something nice with this. Let's say we want to add all these numbers together, all the numbers of this array together. How can we add all the numbers of the array together? So this is what I'm going to do. I want to do that using a function. I don't just want to write that. I want to put everything in a function. So this is what I'm going to do. Uh, I'll create a function here. Hold on. The general, you have a question?
No, so please, you are not sharing your screen.
I'm not sharing my screen.
Yeah.
I am. Um, Mr. Felix, can you see my
But
screen?
your,
Okay, hold on. How about now? Can you see my visual studio?
your screen is not showing.
If it's not
No,
showing, it's
it's
from
not
your hand.
showing.
Hold on. Just hold on.
Okay.
All right, so back to so here, I want to add all the values of the array together, the number value. So I'm just going to put it in a function. So I'll call it add. Or I can use any function, array function, function expression, or function declaration. So let me use function declaration. So yeah, I'm just going to I'll come here, I'll copy this, I'll cut it from here, I'll paste it here. All right. Then I'm going to pass instead of passing numbers. Okay, let me just do numbers or nums. So here I'll call the function with the argument of what numbers. You see that? Call it here. So these nums here, instead of doing numbers, so I want to use these nums instead of numbers. So I'll delete it. So I'll do nums. Yeah, because that's the parameter, and the for loop is inside of the function. So you can see how we are adding, we are, you know, um, making this very nice. You see that we learned function, we learned loop, and we are combining it together. So now we have this. If we save this now, it will still give us this value. Let me change the doc size. So it will still give us 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70. But what we want is we don't want to just output the various value of the for loop of the array. What we want to do is we want to be able to add the numbers together. And to add the numbers together, we need to initialize a variable. So I will call it let sum equals what is 0. It doesn't have to be sum. It can be any variable name, but just give it an initial value of what is 0. But just for readability sake, I have to give it what sum, because your variable name needs to carry a meaning. You get that? So the most important thing is the value that we assign to what to the variable. So we assign 0 to what to sum. So this is what I want to do here. I want to add each of the values of the array to the initial value of sum. That's the goal. I want to add each of the values of the array to the initial value of sum. So I can only do that using the for loop. So I use the for loop to loop over the array um to get all the values of the array one after the other. So what I'm going to do here is, before I console or log this, I'm just going to say sum equals sum plus nums at position 0. Are you with me? Nums at position 0. So this is what it means here. Let me show you what it simply means before I console or log it. So when you say nums equals to, sorry, when you say sum equals to sum plus nums at position I, not position 0, position I. So this is what it means here. All right. Notice that when we declare sum inside of the function, but not inside of the for loop. There are two different things. The for loop has its own block. The function has its own block. The for loop, the for loop block is inside of the function block, but we declare the variable sum inside of the function, but not inside of what for loop. So this sum here is local. The variable sum is locally scoped to what this function. So this is a local variable. So it can only be used within the borders or within the function body. So we have let sum equals 0. Then here we now say, okay, in the for loop, when we loop over the array to get each of the value of the array. So as we get each of the value of the array, we are adding it directly to what, to the initial value of sum by doing it like this: sum equals sum plus num at position I. I hope you still remember this at the second class. I think I taught you this in the second class. So we say let sum equals 0, so we can reassign another value to sum. Why? Because we declare it with what, let. And even we use const, it would like giving us an error. So we say sum, now this is the variable, equals to sum, this is the value, plus nums at position I. So this nums here is the parameter that is representing the actual argument. You get? So now, so this is what it means here. Let me show you. It means sum equals the initial value of sum here is 0, then plus. So the for loop, when it loops at first with the initial, when it loops at first, it's going to give us what, 10. So it's going to be 10. So that will be equals to 10. You get that now? So when it loops the second time, so it's going to be sum equals to, so the initial value of sum will no longer be what, 10, will no longer be 0, will now be what, 10. So we'll say 10 plus, it loops again, we get access to the second value of the array. So that's how it continues until it give us the, until it sums all the values together. All right. So now you might want to ask, or the major mistake that you guys make is, or new students make, or newbies make, is they tend to console or log the sum here. We say console or log the sum here. If you console or log the sum here, you are going to get a cumulative result. Or okay, let me show you how it looks like. Now look at what we have here. We are getting 10, 30, 60, 100, 150, blah 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 blah. So this is what we are getting, and that's not what we want. So this one is the sum of the first iteration. This is the sum of the second iteration, the second time the loop runs. This is the sum of the third time the loop runs. So every time the loop runs, it's going to be giving us the sum. So that means, so here now, so the value that we have here, the number of value that we have is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that means the loop is going to run 7 times. So that makes this console log to log sum 7 times. You get that now? If you check it now, it's 7 times actually. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we don't want to console or log the sum inside of the for loop. Rather, I want to console it outside of the for loop. So I'm going to remove this, and outside of the for loop block, but still within the console, the function, still within the function body, I will just do console.log sum. So now this will give me a single sum. Now watch, it will just give me what, 280. All right, it will give me 280. So good. But there's a better way we can do this. So now you can even call this function with a different value. You can call it with 12, 45, 67, and call again with a different value of um 110, okay, 110, 4, 3, 1, 3, 4, 5, 8, and let's do 7, okay, 75. Let's do this. It's going to give us a different value. Can you see? Fantastic. So this is one of the importance of using a function, because if you do this outside of the function, you have to repeat this functionality. If you do this outside of the function, you have to do this 3 times if you want to get this result. But with the function, you're good to go. All right. So now this will lead me to the other for loop, which is for off loop. For off loop. So let me comment this console here. So for off loop is best to iterate over arrays and other iterable objects. Other iterable objects. So let's see if we still if I capture that in this notes. Oh, I didn't capture that. Okay, I should have it. Yeah. Okay. So the for loop or the for off loop. The for off loop is quite different from the for loop, but they all still perform the same thing. So we use for loop on arrays and iterables like arrays, strings, map, and set. You get that now? So for off loop, it is used to iterate over values. So we use for off loop to iterate over iterable objects like array, strings, map, and what set. So these are the four iterable objects that we have: array, string, map, and set. So let's look at how we can iterate or use for off loop to loop over an array. So I'm going to create another array here. So I'll call this const fruits. So yeah, I'll give it apple. I'll give this banana, and I will give this cherry. All right. So now this how it works for the for off loop. It's similar to for loop. So just do for, then you will say, then you need a variable, just like the way we need a variable for the for loop. But this one is quite different from the for loop. So we'll just say let fruit of fruits. Get that? So we'll console.log fruit. I might want to ask now, this fruit that we have here is a variable. Is a variable. So say let fruit of fruit. So it doesn't have to be fruit. It can be anything. But just to maintain consistency, you get that now. That's why I had to use what fruit. But it can be anything. So now this for off loop, what it does is it's going to loop over the array. Unlike the for off and unlike the for loop, whereby it loops over the array and gets us the index of the array. It gets us the index of the array. So it is that index now we are going to use on the array to be able to get the actual value of the array. But whereas for off loop only loops over values. It is used to get what values. It is used to loop over values. It helps us to get values directly. Just give us the value direct. So now let fruit or fruits. So the fruits here is the array. So the for off loop will loop over the array and assign and and get and assign each of the values of the array to this what variable called fruit. And if you console the log it, we are getting banana, apple, banana, and what cherry. You see, very very simple, very cheap, very very simple. All right, so very 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 simple. So we can also use for off loop, sorry, to loop over a string. So let's just say let, or you can use const. So let's say let word equals hello, and we loop over it. So I'll just come here and paste. So here instead of fruits, I'll do word. Then here I want to get the character, each of the character of the string, and also though we've not looked at string method, like string method in details, like string method. But let me just teach you something about string. Now string has share some similarity with array. String share some similarity with array. So what are the similarities? Now the similarity is this: just as the index of an array is zero base, so also the character of a string is zero base. The character of a string is zero base. That's one. The way you access or retrieve the value of an array using the square bracket, that's the same way you also access or retrieve characters of a string by using square brackets. All right, so let me just stop there. So also let me add this: just like the way we use dot length to get the length of an array, we can also use dot length to get the length of a string. You get that? So but now this fruit now we change it to char, so which represent character. So here I will console the log character, and it's going to output each of the characters out. Can you see? Hello, HELL, but you can see the L is showing twice there. All right, so good. So that's that using for loop. Sorry, for off loop. All right, so let's see how we can use for off loop to be able to achieve the same thing that we achieved with what do you call it, with for loop. It's very simple. I'm going to comment this function here, and I will copy it. So yeah, I'll still maintain the number, the array number. So yeah, instead of using for loop, I'm going to use for off loop. So yeah, I will say let num of nums, correct. So here, instead of doing nums at position I, it's just going to be num. So you uncomment, you save. You can see is shorter now. So if you save this, look at what we have: 280, 124, and 956. Very simple. See that? Very simple. I hope you understand this.
Yes, sir.
All right, good. So the next one we are going to look at is for in loop. Let's look at for in loop. I'm still going to show you something about for off loop, but let's look at for in loop first. Let's treat all the old loop, and if we still have time, I will show you that. And if we don't have time, we'll shift that to tomorrow. For in loop, that's five. For in loop. So this for in loop is used to iterate over object property. So for in loop is best for object. It is used to iterate over the keys of an object or the properties of an object. So for in loop is best for object literal object. All right. So let's say we have an object here. We say let person or const, whichever one. Let or const person be equals to. So we have name John, age 30, and let's use city. Okay, occupation, then city should be um let's say Ghana. All right, so which other thing? Okay, let's just stop here. So now I want to loop over this array. We want to loop over the array. So how do we loop over the array? Sorry, I'm saying array. Sorry, how do we loop over this object? I'm here to get over array. All right, how do we loop over this object? To loop over this object is very simple. So the for in loop takes the same shape as for off loop. So this is what we're going to do. So please take note that the for in loop is used to loop over the object property. So what are the object property here? Name, age, occupation, and what city. So I'll come here, I'll do for loop. Okay, so for in loops, I'll say let um what should I give this now? I can call it key. Yeah. So key also represent property. So it can give anything. It can be prop, it can be key, it can be p, it can be anything. All right, they are just variables. So key in what? Person. Now if you console the log key, let's see what we are going to get. Let me first of all comment this console. To console the log key, let's see what we are going to get here. I'm still getting the console. Okay. All right. So now can you see I'm getting the property name, age, occupation, and what? City. So what if I want to get the value of the property? It's very easy. To get the value of the property, since we know that the key is representing the properties of the array, so what we are going to do is simple. I'll just do, okay, let me comment this and do console.log. So to get the values of this property, all you just have to do is get the person object, the variable, then you do square bracket, then passing what? Key. Passing key. You can't use dot here because if you use person dot key, key is not really it's not a property of the object. Key is just the variable that is holding this property. So the best this thing the best method to use to get the value of an array of, why am I saying array, to get the value of the property of an object is this bracket notation. So now look at, we are getting John 30 developer and what? Ghana. So let's say we can marry the two together now. So I'll come here, I'll say console.log. I'm going to use a backtick, or no, let's not use that. I can use backtick too as well, but let's just do key. Should I okay, let's use a backtick, please. So please pardon me with this. So I'll say key. You have to put it, this is a template string, so I hope you've not forgotten. So if you save this now, look at what we have here. Name John, age 30, occupation developer, city Ghana. Oh, city. No, not city. It's supposed to be country. Country Ghana. Yes. See that? So you can even use the for in loop to loop over an array, but it's not recommended. It's not recommended at all. It's not recommended at all. So now let me show you um how you can use for off loop to loop over an array. Sorry, an object. How you can use for off loop to loop over an object. Or what if you still want to get the index, like you use for off loop now, in this case for fruit, but you still want to get the index. Let's say you still want to get the index of the array aside from the value, because for off loop gets you the value. What if you want to get the value and also the what, and the index? How do we do it? Let me show you. So I'll say get index, get index and values. So this is how you are going to do. You say for loop, let fruits of fruits. Now, these fruits, in order to get the index and the value, you do dot entries. Are you with me? You do dot entry. So these dot entries we convert. Now please listen, this way it becomes difficult. This dot entry, or that we attach to this fruit, the dot entry is a method. So what it does is going to, now look at what we have here. Say it returns an iterable of key value pairs pairs for every entry in the array. So when it talks about every entry in the array, it's talking about apple, banana, and cherry. These are entries. Apple is an entry, banana entry, cherry entry. So it means that all these entries here is going to create an array for each of the entries, holding the index and the value. Holding the index and the value. So for apple entry, it's going to return it as an array. So the array will hold the index of apple and apple itself. So the same thing too for banana and cherry. So here now I'm going to console the log fruit, and let's see what we are going to get. All right. So let me comment this one that we have in the console. So for in loop is very easy. For in loop, very easy to understand. So let's come here. Can you see? Is zero, apple, one, banana, two, cherry. So you can see it's returning it as what, an array. So we could have just as you could have destructured this immediately, but since I haven't taught you guys destructuring, that will be in our future class, in our subsequent class. So I've not taught you destructuring, so we'll still use the normal way of assessing value of an array. So this is what I'm going to do here. I'm going to use my backtick here, and here I will do fruit at position is zero, because if you still remember, to get the index, it has to be fruit at position. This arena is having two elements. To get the index, you have to do position zero. To get the value, you have to do position one. So fruit at position zero, then okay, I don't want this. Then fruit at position one. So if you save this, let's see what we have. So can you see is zero apple, one banana, two what, cherry. All right, very simple. But what if I don't want to start from the value of zero. I want to start from the value of one. So instead of zero, I'll just do one, two, three. All right. I'll just do one, two, three. How do I do it? It's very simple. I will come inside of the syntax for this string interpolation. I'll come here and I'll do plus what, one. So now let's see what we have here. Can you see one, two, three? All right. So that's for using dot entries on array to get the index of the array. So let's say we can use for off loop now on objects, even though it's not recommended. But let's see how we can use for off loop with or on object. Okay, with objects. So we are still going to maintain this person object. So now let me show you something. Let's say you want to get the keys. When I mean keys, you want to get the values. Sorry, you want to get the properties. So properties still means keys. You want to get the keys or the properties of this person object. How do you do it? You can just come here and do const. Let's call it props, or let's just call it keys equals. So you say person. Okay, not person. You do what we call object. Object. Notice that the O there is capitalized, not small letter. There's a difference between small letter O and capital letter O. So object dot keys, like this. You see that if you want to get the keys of the person object, you just say object dot keys, and you pass in the object variable, which is what person. So this object dot keys is going to extract all the properties or keys of the person object that you specify here. Is going to extract it and return it as what? As an array. So now check keys. Let's look at what we have here. It's returning it as what? An array. Okay, what if you want to get the value? You don't want the key, you want to get the value. It's very simple. You say values, so objects dot values, then you pass in what? The person object. Let me duplicate this. So you call this values. If you save, look at what we have. John 30, developer and Ghana. Fantastic. So you can see how we converted it to an array. But what if you want to get the object, sorry, if you want to get the property and its value in an array, just like the way I showed you for the array entry, the entry that you are getting the index and the array itself, the value of the array. So let's say we want to do the same thing too for the object, whereby the name, the property, and its value will be in a separate array. So it's going to do that for all the properties and values that we have here. So how can we do that? I'll come here, I'll do const. Let me call this entries. So I'll say object dot entries. So yeah, I'll pass in what? The person. So let me comment this and show you. So console.log entries. So if you save, that's what we have here. So can you see we're having array inside of array. We're having array inside of array. Hold on. Alright, so we're having an array inside of array. So let's collapse this. Can you see? Name the value John. See that now. So with these entries now, we can loop over it. We can loop over the array now. I can say okay, for let's say let's just call it P of persons. So instead of doing persons directly, I can just do this entry, or I can just say object dot entries, then I'll pass in the person object like this. So now watch what is happening here. Notice when we did object dot entry, it returns an array of arrays. So we have this outer array, then the inner one are the ones holding the property and its respective what value. You see that? So now that we've converted the object to an array of array, so we can now use the for off loop to loop over the outer array. You get that now? To loop over the outer array. And that's what we want to do. So if I console the log p now, for instance, if I console the log p, now watch what we are going to get. We are getting the array, these arrays of arrays that we have here now. We are getting the array out like this. You see that? So now I can confidently, let me copy this and comment and paste. So I can just do p. I can do p at position is 0 and p at position 1. So if you save, look at what we have here. We're getting name John, age 30 and all that. But just know this, the keys, the values, the entry is also very, very important. But the thing is, if you want to loop over an object that you know, all right, Not like if it's let's say you're fetching a data from an API, and you want to do some things with it, like you want to, let's say the value is an object or whatever. I think we'll get to that part, don't worry, we'll get to that part where you will appreciate the keys, values and entry. But just for object literal, don't use for off loop, just use for in loop. This is quite easier than this, because if you want to use for off loop over an array, you have to, sorry, over an object, you have to first of all convert that object to an arrays of array, whereby using object dot what entries, then you pass in the variable of the object, then from there you can do whatever you want to do with it. So I think we are done with loops. So we've looked at while for loop, while loop, do while loop, for off loop, for in loop. All right, so we've looked at all of these things. So tomorrow we are going to look at introduction to document object model, that's DOM. All right, introduction to that. So let's stop here for today. We'll meet tomorrow same time, so please be available by 7 p.m. All right, bye bye.
Okay, sir. Thank
Yeah,
you.
do you have a question?
No, sir.
Okay, you want to say something?
No,
Do you-
sir.
okay, okay, all right, all right, all right, bye bye.